Hello everyone, Mythic here, and welcome back to another Lucium update video, talking for the South America 2.0 and Europe 3.5 updates. Now, a lot has been done in the past 2 months since we last talked to you guys about what's been going on with development. And continuing with our previous themes of always trying to make the mod visually look better, one of the massive things we've done, and I say this is massive because I really just enjoy getting our own versions of these, we have added new little pointer icons. So as you can see here, this is a new kind of pointer, if you can see my mouse, which is in the center of the screen. And we've also added a new hourglass. We used these from Thrones of Britannia because Thrones of Britannia had such good versions, and we brought them in Medieval 2, and they look really good. On the menu front, you can see that we've brought our new menu into the bottom here. And we'll also be adding a new map up here, these new maps. So these faction maps are going to be changed for the new factions and also to just fit the theme better. I'll show you what they look like in Europe 3.5 in a second. And effectively, we're just going to be reworking these so that they fit with the rest of the style. And in other changes basically on this menu, we've also just gone through and made a lot of the flags darker or just to fit the theme better. And so a lot of them have been changed and fixed, but not in major ways that are going to affect anything. We have also added new loading screens. And there's our lovely little mouse hourglass right there. Lovely animated. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about here on the campaign map is that we have gone through and finally done all of the starting positions for factions inside of South America. Buildings have been added to all of the cities. And armies and forts have been placed in strategic locations. Now, you might notice that all of the units down here are just the basic pleb model from Rome 1. And that is due to the fact that we have not added new units for these factions yet, so while all these factions do have units, they aren't actually officially titled under these factions, which is something that's going to be taking place over the next few months of development. We are pretty much now down to the scripts and the units part of development, as well as more visual changes, but visual changes of course happen over the course of years in the development time of Lucium. But it is important to remember that these units will be coming soon, and all of these factions are going to have fleshed out rosters when the release date comes around. Now, what some of you may have noticed while we were going over the map is that a lot of these models are different. For instance, the fort model here is now a star fort, and the city models now have little outbuildings. Our villages have also gotten a change, as now the villages look a lot more time appropriate. And as we mentioned in the last update video, we pulled over Benison's fort models into South America as well. With all of these modeling changes together, this means that the South America map, as well as the map in Europe, because these have been added in Europe as well, which we'll see later, make the world feel a lot more accurate and alive for the time period that we're trying to represent. It is also important to remember that we've added the siege models over. I just want to remind you all of that, so now all of these models work in tandem together to create a real 1700s experience. Another minor modeling change is the moving over of the diplomat model. So we no longer have a conquistador diplomat running around South America in the 1800s. Another major change is our pips. So as we'll see later in the 3.5 section for Europe in this video, the pips have all been redone in Europe and also changed them in bolivars. So we had the base game pips, and I believe at some points we had made our own and or just pulled others from other mods, but now we officially have all of these done by ourselves, hopefully giving the mod a lot more of a polished look and definitely more of an indigenous Lucium design. So as you can see, this is a new type of star. For anti-slavery, we still have the same things. Authority has been changed to a law book, and influence is this feather. Also under the traits screen, you'll be able to see our new additions to the nationality system. Now, in the past, we added a standard number of these nationalities. So for instance, Venezuelan, Colombian, Peruvian, I believe Bolivian, Brazilian, and Portuguese. However, we've added a litany of new nationalities, and these new nationalities include Dominican, Haitian, Jamaican, Mexican, Yucatan, Yankee, Dixie, Irish, Nicaraguan, Canadian, Quebecois Creole, Louisiana Creole, and Costa Rican. Another change we made in the trait system is that we have gone through and changed the religious traits to be focused on the academics, similar to how we changed the priests, not similar, but seeming how we changed the priests from priests to teachers in this. We've gone through and changed those traits to stop talking about piety and more about education. So now we have scholarly connection, enemy of the non-conforming, and professor. These are just some of the traits that our new teachers can have as they spread culture throughout South America. Now, the last major change we have to talk about for South America is the beginning of one of our scripts. And by beginning, I mean we've already done this script, but it's the beginning of our scripts for the new 2.0 update. What we have done is we have gone through and we have given all of the Mapuche settlements, all of the Araucanian settlements, sorry, because the Mapuche are a distinct group of Araucanians, their own indigenous names, very similar to what we found for their actual real-life locations. Now, these aren't going to be 100% accurate, but they're much better than the Latinized names we had for the Native American nations at the start. The script aspect of this change comes into effect when you conquer a Native American city as a European/Latin faction. The next turn after you conquer that city, it will be renamed to its Latin name. And this has been done for all of those factions. So as you conquer and colonize South America and Patagonia, the names will change with the conquests. Now for the final part of our South America update, we're going to quickly talk about some of the mapping changes that have taken place to make this era more historically accurate, make the map more accurate, and generally get the settlements right. One major thing we did was we improved the accuracy around these rivers. So prior to this, the rivers did not split in the way that they do in real life, and so that has been fixed now, just to hopefully represent this area better. And when I say this area, I did forget the name. Oh, Incharios. I had a very helpful person from the Lucium community inform me about the geography of this area, and that was very useful. Another water change over here is that we added lakes. We added a lot of lakes throughout the map, hopefully in areas where they are important or just make the map look better in general. So for instance, around Cordoba, up here around Angostura we added a lake, as well as the lakes around Managua. You might notice there are these armies kind of scattered around Central America and Nicaragua. These are going to be scripted armies later, so they're not going to be just standing out here in the middle of nowhere. They are just here for the moment until we do the scripts for them. For some non-geographic changes, we went through and we fixed all of the inaccuracies we had with Chile's settlements. We had a very useful person in the Discord server who was able to point us out where the cities were wrong and how to fix them. So we went through and hopefully rectified most of the situations and just made it more accurate. That concludes our segment for the South America 2.0 update for this video. We're now going to be moving into the 3.5 for Europe. Welcome to Lucium Europe 3.5. The first thing we have to talk about here is the menu, the aforementioned menu changes that are going to be brought over to Bolivars. As you can see, it carries over this sort of column up further and generally just makes it fit the theme of the menu a whole lot better. Also on the menu, it's important to talk about the new flag changes. So the Scandinavian, Hungarian, Hesse-Kassel, and Hanoverian flags have also been improved, making them more color corrected, similar to how we did in Bolivars, and making them more symmetrical. We have also changed the loading images again, such as in Bolivars, to all have the starting positions in the loading screens. One of the largest changes, and in my opinion the most important for the mod's detailing, is the Xenophonia pack. This goes in and adds the indigenous languages and accents for every nation. As many as we could. Some nations won't have them, for instance the Kazakhs, as well as the Barbary states were left a little dry when it came to indigenous sound files, but we did our best with what we had. So for instance, if we are to click on this lady right here,
Votre Majesté.
She speaks a language that I do not understand.
Seigneur. Mon roi. I am a warrior, not an emissary, my lord.
The English, of course, are still English. This adds a load of detail to the mod and just makes the world feel a lot more real, hopefully showing the diversity of nations that are included inside of 3.0 and Europe in general. Now, similar to South America, you can see that we've gone in and we've added the new models for the cities and the fortifications, as you can see here from Strasbourg, Saarbrücken, and of course Frankfurt. And that brings me on to another point on the campaign map, the complete overhaul of Germany and Germany's cities and borders. For the longest time, Germany was crazily historically inaccurate, and at some points we believe we had changed that, but it was still quite awful, so we had to go in and fix a lot of that. Litany of changes we made include getting the cities correct. So for instance, now we have Nuremberg, Frankfurt, Marburg, and some cities were moved to fit in the places that they should actually be. For instance, Münster over here instead of Cologne. And we also spruced up the borders just around the areas, making them conform more to rivers and geological features as opposed to just being freeform. Continuing on to the mapping changes, Spain has seen a large change in the way that it's been formatted. Spain now has a litany of forts scattered throughout the map. I am overusing the word litany, of course, I understand this, but it is what it is. Spain had not had their starting position changed since Lucium 1.1, so the addition of forts and moving the armies around is pretty big by Spain's comparison. We also changed a lot of rivers and trees just to make Spain a lot more navigable and just generally easier to move around. On the subject of start positions, we've also changed the Papal State start positions to again include forts, and we've also improved biographies. So for instance, Pope Innocent now has Pope Innocent XII. Venice has also seen changes to their start position, adding more forts throughout the entirety of the Mediterranean, such as on Crete, islands in the Aegean Sea, and just generally changing the units which they start with. And we also have Innocent over here as Pope Innocent the 13th. And then we have Clement, Pope Clement the 11th. And Benedict, Pope Benedict the 13th. As you can see, the popes are also equipped with a Swiss Guardsman, which is a trait that has been assigned to every Papal States General at the start. And as I mentioned in the other part, we've also gone around and changed the pips for 3.5 as well. So for instance, now there are rings, lots of rings, and crowns for the authority. And just like in Boulevards, they are stars for command power. Speaking of traits, just like in South America, there have been a lot of new traits added into the mod, specifically focusing around royal houses. So now we've added the Wittelsbachs for Bavaria, the Hohenzollerns in Prussia, the House of Orange in the UK, the Palatinate Zweibrücken in Sweden, Savoy, Wettin, Hesse-Kassel, Hesse-Philippsthal, Medici, Braganza, Oldenburg, and Bagration. Now let's run through a few more changes on the campaign. When you start a new campaign, you'll be greeted by the Welcome to Lucium Total War, followed by the Welcome to Your Nation, followed by the Harder Economy, and followed by a fourth pop-up. This one is new, the Difficulty Placing Policy. Now, a lot of people who are new to Lucium have trouble with the policy system. It can be a little confusing at the start if you're not sure what to do, so we've given this option that will automatically place things for you just to save you time and help with a little confusion for any new players. So this will put pre-picked policies into all of the settlements across your nation depending on if you pick it, and all it will cost you is 2,000 of your starting gold. So for instance, if we click that button, you can now see we have economic policy, cultural policy. For fortifications, we will have military policy, if I can find a fortification, Prague of course. And I think this shows a really good example real quick of another change that has been done, and that is the color coordinations of these borders. So for instance, we have the minor fortification here, which is a darker kind of orange, similar to the way that the cities are, followed by the cultural border, which is a green, followed by the landmark building, which is a blue border, followed by the actual city buildings, which are a gold, and then another sort of darker but brighter orange, if that makes sense, for the policies. And now, while we're on the subject of borders, we need to talk about the minor but massive time-consuming border change. So for the longest time, if you looked at these borders up close, you could see where they weren't properly centered, and there was a invisible line in the bottom left corner, and that has been fixed now. All borders now are uniform, and there is no invisible line. And despite the fact that it is a minor change that most people would not notice, the amount of time it must have taken is awe-inspiring. While we're looking at buildings, there have been some buildings added to the mod recently, and also some reworks for how upgrades are done. So for instance, a new type of building has been added to Lucium, and that is the theater. So we have buildings such as the local theater, the opera house, and the royal opera house. All of these just provide like tradable goods, health, and happiness for people. And another change that's been done is the academia section, where we have research institutes, large research institutes, and University of Research bureaus. These play a similar role to the leather tanner, and I believe there's a building that the Byzantines use in base game Medieval 2 that does something similar to this, but I cannot remember it for the life of me. But effectively what it does is it upgrades your weapons and it just increases a bunch of stuff. It's just another flavor building, but it adds a lot to the mod, and is a general good buff if you have the money to go for it. And seeing as how we talked about the landmark buildings in the previous part, it makes sense that we would continue to talk about them here. Landmark buildings have now been added to all of Austria, the Ottoman Empire, Denmark, Sweden, Poland, Lithuania, Russia, Wallachia, Moldavia, and Egypt. These buildings just continue to play a massive part in the world building experience we're trying to properly represent here in Lucium. Another small change that's occurred is we have replaced the base game and mob model with another new model, just furthering to improve the level of detail that we've added to the mod. And, not to mention, a new Ottoman Envoy model. Talking about another minor change, we have also changed the names for the taxation levels, so we now have progressive taxation, constrictive taxation, regressive taxation, and exploitative taxation. While we're on Persia, it's important to mention Persia has received a nerf. They started with a lot of special resources that provided them obscene amounts of wealth, making them very overpowered, and so hopefully to nerf them we have removed those resources, making Persia do less of a strength spiral. Jumping back to Iberia, it's important to mention that now Iberian culture has been broken up into Portuguese, Spanish, and Aragonese cultures. As well as we made some other changes. There is now a minor script where if you take Breslau, it is renamed to Wrocław. If you take Stettin, it'll be renamed to Szczecin. I can't probably pronounce that because I'm not Polish. As well as if you take Trieste as Italy, Trieste's South German culture becomes Italian culture. The last and one of the largest changes that has been done for Lucium 3.5 is the completion of all unit descriptions. There are roughly around 460 unique units inside of Lucium 3.5, and now every single one of those units has descriptions done by Freelance 7. He recently did the last batch of them, completing all the factions, which was around 120 unit descriptions, or 120 paragraphs of writing. So for instance, you can see these Gulams have their own description, the Corsair Pikemen have their description, the Barbary Foot has their description, and the Corsair Swordsman. Now, I'm not going to show every single one of these, but the reason I show the Barbary States is because the Barbary States have such a wealth of diverse units. Anyway, everybody, we hope you enjoyed this video. We hope that you are all still interested in Lucium as you were in the past. We know that development has been slow, and we have not been the most communicative as we were in the past. However, we assure you that development is still plugging along, and your favorite mod will soon be back, with all of its new improvements. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and join our Discord server. Mythic out.